Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, a slight disappointment from a favourite author and a new contender for the most disturbing book I've ever read. It's my weekly wrap-up. A quick apology before we start. The audio in today's video is not quite as good as it normally is. I normally record on a separate microphone and then stitch it all together in the editing process, and I forgot to start the audio recording for this video. So you're just getting the audio off my camera rather than off my microphone. I think I've managed to clean it up a bit in editing, so it's definitely audible, but just wanted to apologise for that up front and let you know why there's a slight difference in the sound this time around. Anyway, I will leave it there and let you get back to the video. So a very varied reading week this week, as you will see when I talk about the books I've read. You may have got a hint of that from the thumbnail for this video. So yeah, I've read some very, very different things this week, very different from each other. As usual for these videos in June, I'll group it into the three different types of book I've been reading this month. So firstly, Westerns for June on the Range, the Western themed reading event created by the great Michael K. Vaughan. So I've read a couple of Westerns for that. I've then read some extreme horror for my month where I'm trying out some extreme horror to see what I think of it. I read a book which I think is considered to be a classic of extreme horror, and I actually really enjoyed it. So I'll talk about that. And then I will also talk about some other things I've read for other projects and things like that that I've got going on. And one book that I didn't even have on my TBR for this month, actually, which has just come out and I really wanted to read it. And that's the book, you may be able to guess what it is from the thumbnail. That's the book that was slightly disappointing. It wasn't quite as good as I hoped it would be. Right, let's go through each of those types of books then. So first, Westerns. So I read an enjoyable paperback Western, the Gunsmith book 66, Outlaw Trail by J.R. Roberts, whose real name was Robert Randisi. So there were hundreds of books in the Gunsmith series, and incredibly, Robert Randisi wrote all of them. An amazing achievement to have written quite so many books in the series. They are not like great literature by any means, but they are really enjoyable. This is the second one I've read, and I had a really good time with it. So the Gunsmith, the hero of these books, Clint, is, as the name would suggest, a gunsmith, but also kind of a bit of a gunfighter. So he's very good at like repairing and adapting weapons and things like that, but also just gets involved in the kind of normal gunfighter type of stuff. In this one, he gets involved with a young woman who herself becomes sympathetic to two women who are on trial, who she believes are innocent, and it's about them like escaping from prison and kind of going on the run, and the gunsmith having to go after them to kind of set things straight again. So it was a fun, enjoyable, fast-paced Western, as is often the case with these long-running Western series like Long Arm. There's a bit of sauciness in this book as well, but yeah, it was a fun read. I enjoyed that. The other Western I read this week then was one that I didn't originally have on my TBR, but I found it in my pile of books the other day, and it really appealed to me, and I enjoyed it very much indeed. So it's A Wind of Knives by Ed Kurtz. So this is a Western novella, and it's like a revenge story. So it's about a guy who's a rancher who goes on a revenge quest, and there are certain kind of almost like mystical elements to it as well. The thing that is a bit different about this book is the person whose death he is avenging is his male lover. So the rancher was previously married, is a widower, and then had like fallen in love with one of his ranch hands, and they had a relationship. And this guy has subsequently been murdered by this kind of brutal gang. And it's about the main character like going on a quest of revenge. Really well done. Very atmospheric. It really captured that kind of Western vibe, but with, you know, something a bit different going on as well. I really enjoyed the kind of slightly mystical edge to it. But it's also just a very satisfying revenge story. So yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. So that's the Westerns. Moving on to the extreme horror then. So the book that I read, which many people consider to be a classic of extreme horror, was The Bighead by Edward Lee. So this originally came out, I think, in the early 90s. And it is a wild ride of a book. I'm going to do a full review of this one because I think it's a really interesting book. It is very graphic, very, very shocking. It has huge amounts of like sexual assault and things like that in there. And it's a lot to take, and it doesn't mess about. It gets straight into that right from the start of the book, and the first like couple of chapters are like really, really shocking, to the extent I was thinking, do I really want to carry on with this? Do I really want to read this? But Edward Lee's writing is very, very good. And what he does here is he weaves together a story with a bunch of different characters. There's kind of 3 groups of characters. And you follow them as their lives kind of converge. So the Bighead of the title is this kind of monstrous guy who lives out in the woods. It's set in the Appalachian Mountains. So he lives out in the woods and is completely wild. He reminded me a bit of the main character in the Cormac McCarthy book, Child of God. So you've got him, you've got these 2 young women, one of whom grew up in the area, who's returning to the area to see her aunt who lives there. With a friend, like a young woman she's met kind of on the road. So you've got them, and then you've got these 2 awful, awful guys who are just going around attacking people, basically, like really horrific people. And there's also actually a priest character who's come back, who's come to the area to reopen an abbey in the area that was previously used as like a hospice for priests and has been disused for a long time. So you've got quite an interesting mix of different characters there. And they all bring something different to the story and to the themes of the story. So as I say, it's very, very graphic at times, but really for me, it was a story about, guilt and self-will, like our capacity to make decisions for ourselves. The fact we will often make bad decisions for ourselves. And the fact that, morality plays a part in those decisions, and different people's morality is calibrated in different ways, shall we say, I suppose. So a very, very interesting book, really genuinely horrific at times, but also very, very funny at times. There's some bits, particularly towards the end of the book, which I thought were brilliantly humorous. So yeah, a fascinating read. And as I say, I will do a full review of it soon. The other horror then, and I wouldn't say this was extreme horror, but I'll bunch it in with horror, was a short story collection I got sent by the author a while ago. So this is The Edge of Insanity by James Flynn. Let me give you a look at the cover there. So this is kind of marketed as horror, but for me, really, it felt more like science fiction. All of the stories in here do have horror elements to them, but they feel more like science fiction stories in that they take an idea and just run with it and explore it. There's robots and spaceships and things like that. So a lot of the stuff you would expect from kind of pulpy 50s science fiction. And that was really the vibe I got from these stories. It felt like reading stories from like an old issue of I can't remember what it's called now, Astounding Tales or Astonishing Tales, whatever it was called. Let me know in the comments what it was called. I think it was Astounding Tales. So yeah, it's got that kind of a vibe to it. And the stories are really, really fun. So yeah, I had a good time with this. A mix of different things in here. Not all the stories work perfectly. Some of them can be a little bit rough around the edges, but some of the ideas are very interesting. And he grounds the science fiction in the real world in quite an interesting way at times in this book. A lot of those, like there's one story which is set in a very recognisable kind of modern England, but has an alien invasion basically. So interestingly done, and I did enjoy it. Right, moving on to other things then. So 2 other things finished this week. So let's talk about this one first. So this is King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby. So I've talked a lot about S.A. Cosby on the channel. I think he's a really great new voice in crime fiction. This is, I found slightly disappointing. I was expecting to be absolutely wowed by it, as I have been by his past few books, and I wasn't. There's a lot that is really, really good in this book. But some of it I found just didn't quite work for me. So it's about this guy, Roman, who is he's like a financial consultant almost, but a financial consultant for people who've become hugely rich kind of unexpectedly. So like influencers and people like that. And he basically advises them on how to not waste all of their money. He goes back to his hometown because his dad's been involved in a car accident. And when he gets there, he realises that actually there's a bit more going on. His brother, who still lives in the town, has got into trouble with some nasty guys. And it's really about Roman and his brother and his sister, who also lives in the town, but particularly Roman, trying to sort this problem out. And it gradually, getting worse and worse. It gradually kind of spiralling out of control. There's also a really interesting kind of second plot, like a kind of backstory type plot about the sibling's mother who disappeared years ago, and the kind of suspicion amongst the people in the town is that their father murdered her. So you get that kind of mystery played out through the book as well. I thought that part of the book was brilliant. I really, really enjoyed that part of the book. The section that's about Roman trying to sort out his brother's problems, I didn't enjoy as much. I thought the kind of gangster characters that are part of it, I wasn't completely convinced by. And there were some parts of it I just felt kind of dragged a little bit, and it felt like S.A. Cosby was kind of spinning the wheels a bit rather than moving the plot forward. But still, it has some, parts of this book are absolutely brilliant. And overall, I enjoyed it. It just wasn't perfect for me. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I expected it to. The other thing I've read from the other bucket this week then was Proof by Dick Francis. So this was my novel life pick for 1984. Dick Francis, was very well known in the UK as a jockey, but became a writer and wrote dozens and dozens of kind of thriller stories. This one was really, really interesting, and I enjoyed it a lot. So it's about a guy who's a wine merchant who ends up getting involved in an investigation into counterfeit booze, basically people selling booze in restaurants and claiming it's a really expensive Scotch whisky, for example, when actually it's a really cheap one. And he gets for various reasons gets hired by an investigative. A guy who runs an investigation company who's looking into various things to do with this. He gets hired because he's an expert, as a wine merchant, he's an expert in tasting booze. And it's about how all these different elements of the plot kind of come together. There's a load of different things going on in the book. There's a really shocking scene right at the start, like a terrible tragedy that happens, which ends up playing far less of a role in the book as you might expect it to, but was like a really dramatic scene. But the central character is just really, really likeable, really interesting to read, and one of those kind of everyman characters that you get in thrillers sometimes, who just keeps on trying to do the right thing. And the ending of this book was absolutely fantastic. The way he kind of sorts things out at the end, and particularly overcomes the villains at the end, was just absolutely perfect, I thought. So yeah, enjoyed that very much indeed. In terms of things I'm currently reading then, so I've got two things on the go at the moment. So I'm reading The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein. So this is my buddy reading with my dad book for this month. One of his favourite science fiction books. My dad is a big fan of science fiction. I think this is the first science fiction book. In fact, I think it's the only science fiction book that's in the list of 12 books that we're reading. I have read it before, but I'm really enjoying rereading it. So it's interesting because it's set. So it was written, I'm guessing, in the 50s or 60s. I didn't check, apologies. But it's set in 2075. But it feels like quite a credible 2075 if the book was written today. So it's set on a lunar colony where there's an artificial intelligence computer that helps run the colony, basically. And it's about people who live on the colony getting disaffected with the world government and the way they're treated by it. So it feels like super, super current in many ways, and really interestingly written. It's written in a nice kind of vernacular type of style, so you're getting a sense of the way people live and talk in this imagined future. So yeah, I'm enjoying that a lot. I'm also reading a really, really horrifically disturbing book. So The Bighead, whilst it was really graphic and definitely disturbing at times, I didn't overall find hugely disturbing. This book has really got under my skin almost straight away and is really making me feel ill. I'm almost halfway through it. I'm pretty confident I will finish it, but it is really, really horrible. It's The Sluts by Dennis Cooper, which is very well known as a work of kind of disturbing, transgressive fiction, which I've been meaning to read for years and hadn't got around to. It's written in a really interesting way. So it came out in the early 2000s, but it's written as a series of like website posts and chat transcripts and things like that. So written, so far at least, entirely in that way. Which is, I think, it's probably very early as an example of kind of a, quote unquote web novel. And it's centres around, certainly in the first part of the book, the section I've read so far, a website where people review like male escorts, basically. And there's this particular thread about this one guy called Brad, and like these various wild stories about things that may or may not have happened to him. The thing that's fascinating about the book is because it's all written, as I say, is like these transcripts and things like that, and posts. You don't know who any of these people really are. You don't know if they're really who they claim they are. You don't know if they are twisting a version of the truth. Well, you don't know if are they telling the complete truth? Are they twisting a version of the truth, or are they just complete fantasists who've completely made up what they are writing because they've got swept up in this discussion about this particular escort? It's kind of mind blowing in a way, because it's unsettling and destabilizing, really, because you don't know. There's nothing to really grip onto as a definite truth in this book, and that is really, really fascinating. But yeah, some of the stuff that's talked about in here is really, really horrible and disturbing. So it's definitely a book that comes with a warning. But I am fascinated by it so far, and definitely gripped by it. I'm really keen to see, A, I suppose, what actually happens with the story, but B, do you ever get to a point in the book where you know what's really happening? It's a very interesting read. Right, so that's what I have read and what I'm currently reading. In terms of channel stuff then, so in the last week you've had my review of another excellent and very disturbing book, Butcher by Joyce Carol Oates, which I thought was just phenomenal. Lots of people commenting on that video and suggesting other Joyce Carol Oates books I should read, so thank you very much if you're one of them. You had my mid-year free count tag, so kind of an annual tradition on BookTube, where at the mid-year point we just reflect back on our reading in the first 6 months of the year. And then you had a video where I talked about my views on not even on the question really, but more on the debate around whether audiobooks are really reading or not. In a way, I don't really care about the answer to the question. I'm more interested in the debate. So that's what you've had in the past week. In the week ahead, then, you'll get my July TBR. Everything I'm going to be reading in July, and remember that's the month I've given my TBR over to viewers to decide what I read, so I'll talk about what I'm going to be reading for that. You'll get a review, I think, of King of Ashes, as that's a new release. I'd like to get a review up in the week ahead, and then you are also going to get I'm losing my words, the cover reveal for the book that I'm publishing along with Alex from the channel Alex Unabridged at the start of August. So this is Trash Tales, which is an anthology of trashy fiction, which we're launching to coincide with Garbology 2025. So Garbology, my annual reading event where we celebrate the joy of reading trashy books. So Garbology will be coming back next year. We are publishing a short story collection to go along with it, and we'll do a cover reveal and talk about that, things like pricing and how many stories are on and that kind of thing. So that'll be going up on Tuesday. So look out for that both on my channel and on Alex's channel. Right, I will leave it there. Oh, and I forgot to say, actually, on that note, do not forget that Garbology, which is the book that I published last year with Troy Treddock for Garbology, goes out of print at the end of July. I put up a post on my wall the other day. We don't call it a wall, do we? On my channel page, my community tab, that's what we call it. I put up a post saying it was going out of print at the end of the month, forgetting that we're in June rather than July. So apologies, not going out at the end of print, not going out of print at the end of June. It's going out at the end of July. So you've got just over a month to grab a copy, should you want to. I'll leave links in the description to the video to where you can get it. All proceeds go to charity. Right, that's me done. Hope you've had a good reading week. Let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about, particularly if you've read either the Bighead or the Sluts. Let me know what you made of those. So yeah, hope you're having a good reading week. And as always, thanks very much for... I've forgotten what I say. I'll start that again. So as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. I hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.